My name is Lauren Mitchell. When I was 8 years old, I testified in court against my father's father for the abuse he committed against me. When I was nearly 6, my parents divorced. My mother was determined to put as much distance as possible between us and my father's side of the family. She moved my younger sister and me to Riverside, a city nearly 5 hours away from Pine Creek, and found work as an administrative assistant at a women's correctional facility. She was newly sober, raising 2 children alone, and doing everything she could to survive. During school breaks, my father would drive from eastern Redwood County to pick us up for family visits. At the time, he was living with his parents. It was during those visits that I was made to sleep alone in the same bed as my grandfather. It was treated as completely normal. My grandmother worked late shifts as a nurse in a neighboring town and didn't come home until after midnight. It was during those nights that the abuse occurred. There were at least 2 incidents later documented in police reports. But at the time, I didn't have the language to understand what was happening. That changed when my second-grade teacher showed a child safety video about appropriate and inappropriate touch. Something clicked instantly. I went home and told my mother everything. She had already noticed changes in me panic at school, emotional withdrawal, and the way I came back from visits looking distant and neglected. By age 9, I was already talking about not wanting to live. When I told her, everything suddenly made sense. She acted immediately, calling the police, child services, and close friends. Detectives began interviewing me at home. Because my parents' divorce was ongoing, we had a court-appointed case manager. That person alerted my father, who at the time worked as a junior prosecutor in Redwood County. We believe he warned his family. That same day, relatives gathered for hours and constructed an alibi, claiming my grandfather had been physically incapacitated during the time of the abuse. I knew this was false. My memory of what happened was clear. I was placed in therapy and group counseling with other children who had experienced similar harm. Eventually, there was enough evidence for charges to be filed, 1 count of sexual assault and 1 count of abuse of a minor. But the trial was delayed for over a year. My grandfather hired an expensive legal team. By the time I testified, I was older, exhausted, and traumatized by everything that had happened in between. I later learned my father had arranged a private lie detector test for his father, which he failed. Around the same time, my father began showing up unannounced at my school, speaking to teachers and administrators, subtly trying to influence them. My mother pulled me out and enrolled me in a small private school. When my father tried to appear there too, he was finally turned away. At trial, I testified for nearly 2 hours. I was 8.5 years old. My mother was intentionally barred from the courtroom by being called as a witness. I faced questioning alone, surrounded by relatives who supported the man who hurt me. I broke down repeatedly. There were other women who had reported inappropriate behavior by my grandfather years earlier, but their testimonies were excluded. The case rested entirely on me. After 3 days, the jury found him not guilty. I believed I had failed. Life continued. School was hard. Therapy came and went. Months later, my mother discovered my grandfather had filed a civil lawsuit against the state, therapists, and investigators. When she later tried to obtain all court records, she was told many had been lost in a flood. Years passed. My father remarried and attempted to regain custody. Around that time, my younger sister entered therapy, and allegations emerged that our father had harmed her as well. She later recanted. The court ultimately restricted his access to us. He chose his legal career over his children. Despite complaints, he continued rising through the legal system and eventually became a judge. I grew up quietly. We moved often. I struggled in school and with anxiety. As a teenager, I discovered writing. In college, I found freedom, but also alcohol, disordered eating, and avoidance. At 22, I had no plan. Eventually, my mother urged me to seek help. I got sober. Slowly, I rebuilt my life. I found my voice again through writing. I began working with survivors. I started a podcast called Unbroken Voices. I reconnected with my childhood therapist. I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing support. What saved me was therapy, community, and truth. And for those who can't afford therapy, I say this: support groups exist. Survivors helping survivors exist. You don't have to carry this alone. My life has come full circle, not because justice is perfect, but because I refuse to disappear. This video is shared to raise awareness, honor survivors, and remind anyone watching, you are not alone, and what happened to you was not your fault. If this story resonates with you, we encourage you to seek support, whether through therapy, survivor groups, or trusted communities. Thank you for watching and holding space for difficult truths.